In an innovative episode of The Simpsons, Bart and Lisa join a newly mixed scout group. However, the adventure takes an unexpected turn when two hackers invade the broadcast, taking the show hostage in exchange for bitcoins, displaying clips that compromise the integrity of all the characters from The Simpsons. At the beginning of the episode, we see Bart excited, arriving in his scout uniform and talking about how eager he was to join. Then, he asks his dad to pass the family horn, and as soon as he does, to everyone's surprise, Lisa arrives also dressed as a scout and playing her instrument. Bart, looking back, doesn't understand what's happening, as she wasn't a boy and couldn't be a scout. He also comments that what she played was a fiskney, but Lisa, confidently, explains that it's exactly what he just said and that it's the hardest one to play. She also informs him that not only had she joined, but she had already earned 3 badges, one for environmentalism, another for comet collection, and one for sister rivalry. The two start glaring at each other, but Marge steps in to break up the argument. However, the scene changes dramatically to an announcement directed at corporate titles. Badge earning and sibling rivalry. Stop this now! Attention, corporate leaders! It is announced that this message was made by Pseudo-Imus and that they made contact through the broadcast to inform that they were a nameless anarchist and reactivist collective. They claimed to have published the internal emails of Waffle House, taken down the A Store Near You program from Home Depot, and now they had hacked corporate servers, seizing hundreds of hours of unreleased footage from The Simpsons TV show. According to them, these stories were so sick and so dumb that if they were exposed, they would destroy even the intellectual property of the series. However, if they didn't receive the ransom of $20 million in bitcoins, they were willing to show all these terrifying scenes one after another, starting at that exact moment. The first scene reveals the truth about Lenny. At Moe's bar, Lenny, Carl, and Homer are gathered. Carl begins by saying it couldn't be true that the new revelation that Lenny never existed was real. Then he finds out that Lenny, all this time, was only a product of his imagination, created to help him deal with a terrible trauma. Lenny never existed? So, Lenny was a product of my imagination? I created him. Carl asks what this trauma was, and Homer explains that the trauma was exactly the fact that he had discovered that his last best friend wasn't real, and this was something that kept happening. The scene quickly repeats, and Homer, without hesitation, serves more drinks to everyone. Back to the hackers, they show they were telling the truth and order the company to transfer the $20 million in bitcoins to the cryptocurrency address provided. Until the payment was received, they would continue displaying the scenes that no one should see. The second scene is titled No Predictions, Dude. The scene shows a Christmas at the Simpson family's house, when Lisa asks what the name of the dog they received was. Homer responds with a number, but then changes the name to Santa's Little Helper. Then Bart from the future, much older now, appears, greeting everyone from the past and saying he came back in time to reveal future events, so the family could predict the future in a chillingly accurate way. Number 8, or better yet, Santa's Little Helper. So, how's it going, you past losers? The first prediction Bart makes is to warn that in 2016, the Nobel Prize in Economics will be awarded to Bank Holmstrom. However, Homer says no one would care about such a prediction and asks him to say something more impactful. Then, Bart reveals that Donald Trump will be president, and Lisa begs him to provide less impressive information about the future. Bart then begins making several revelations, like people stockpiling gas, the pandemic, Germany defeating Brazil in the 2014 World Cup, Disney buying Fox, and when Homer questions if both would go bankrupt, Bart reveals that no, they will be captured by Panda Express. The third scene shows an explosion on a very rainy night. A boat is adrift. Inside it are the captain and Willie, who face the night's challenges until they are startled by a loud noise. When they look back, they discover that their boat has been struck by lightning, causing a huge fire. Willie tries to put out the fire by stomping on the flames with his feet, until the captain tells him to get and use the fire extinguisher. However, Willie doesn't understand the instructions and keeps trying to put out the fire his way. Finally, he grabs the extinguisher, but instead of using it correctly, he starts hitting the fire with it. The captain continues to give instructions, but when Willie gives up on the extinguisher and throws it aside, he accidentally activates it, putting out all the fire. Once the two calm down, they are hit by a massive wave, and the story's final outcome is left unknown. The fourth scene is about Chump Street 21. On Springfield Street, the school bus is dropping kids off at home when it arrives at Martin's house. He says goodbye to his classmates but ends up getting punched by the bully Nelson. Then he enters his home, completely frustrated and tired, being greeted by his wife because, in reality, Martin was a married man. The kid asks how his day at school was, and Martin explains that it wasn't really school for him but his demanding and tough job. His wife, Doreen, asks why he doesn't quit, but this only makes Martin even more irritated. He explains that he couldn't quit because the police department needed someone infiltrated in the school. The argument gets more intense when Doreen asks why it should be him. Martin explains that it's because he's the only 36-year-old man who could pass for a 10-year-old child. However, Doreen begins complaining, saying Martin isn't being a good father to their kids, as he spends most of his time away. Martin, in turn, reveals he doesn't like school at all. How about you try being a good father? The kids barely know you. You spend every afternoon out until about 3 p.m., 4 if there's chess club. At this moment, his wife confesses she doesn't know where he's been going anymore, as she can't distinguish when her husband is Martin or Red, revealing that that's the character's real name. This revelation deeply saddens Martin. He sits on the couch and starts saying maybe his wife is right, as he had become too involved in his story after it was revealed. However, he didn't want his diagnosis to affect him, because he thought of using it for good. When he asks his wife if he's doing well, she says yes and affirms he is a great role model for their 3 kids. Then she reveals she wants to have another baby with him. How am I doing? You're doing well. Yes, Red, you're a great role model for your kids, all 3 of them. Again, the hackers appear and check their wallet, discovering that the company hasn't deposited any bitcoins. They question if the program doesn't care about the nonsense being spread in their name. The woman even wonders if there was a mistake or misunderstanding in underestimating the company. After her partner encourages her, they end up in a strange situation when he recalls a moment when he complimented her. However, they decide to return to talking about big corporations. But when their voices are muted, the woman starts complimenting the man's voice she's working with. Upon finding out he's single, they share a romantic moment but stop when they realize they're live. Then they decide to show more terrifying scenes. According to them, the 5th scene shows Lisa learning French. In this scene, we see Lisa making a call to report a fire happening in Springfield. However, all of her speech is in French. When asked if she spoke English, she responds yes, but since she was in the middle of her French class, she was obliged to continue speaking in French. As a result, several people in the burning building ask for help, but Lisa insists on speaking French, even though the person on the other side tells her they don't understand anything and can't help. I can't help if I don't understand. Doesn't anyone care to do something? Lisa then gives more information, saying the fire is near a fireworks store, but shortly after, an explosion of those fireworks starts, and Lisa gives up on reporting the fire to the authorities. The 6th scene is about the dream play. Homer and Marge are on a football field Homer made after destroying the entire corn crop, intending for the field to attract the ghosts of former players who had passed away. His plan works, as several players soon appear on the field. However, Homer says he doesn't recognize any of them, and Marge makes an observation about the field. This makes Homer realize that he actually made a Canadian field, and he watches the disaster unfold with the players on the field. Built a Canadian field, my bad. Oops, my bad, hey, nice play. The 7th scene reveals Professor Frink in 2 worlds. Soon Frink starts setting up his camera and records that it's day 150 on Mars and that he's trapped there. He also starts suspecting that his astronaut colleagues had left him trapped on purpose, as when he was in the bathroom, he heard his companions laughing and whispering, telling him to hurry up and leave before Frink came out of the bathroom. He had only 3 days of air and water and soon thinks of a strategy to buy more lifetime. With this, Frink achieves this feat by applying pseudoscience and ghostly engineering to solve his problem. Additionally, he clones himself for company and shows that his companion built an escape rocket. However, all the clones of Frink enter the spaceship but forget the real Frink, who, seeing this scene, becomes completely disoriented. Get out of there! Flavonize me in the glavinize! The 8th scene is about the apology to Finland. In a video, Homer introduces himself and then starts making a big apology to the people of Finland for what he had said. He explains that he had made many episodes, but in one of them, he had confused Finns with Norwegians. Homer warns that there's much love and respect for Finns, and explains he never thought that an innocent slip-up would upset an entire country. He admits that, in reality, he should have kept his mouth shut, because if not for that, the terrifying lawyers he worked for wouldn't have had to write that statement. When he finishes his speech, he's told he needs to re-record all those lines, but Homer doesn't even understand what he said wrong to have to redo it all. The 9th scene will show Seymour Skinner's fascination. Skinner is having dinner with his mother, and while chewing loudly, she starts complaining, demanding he chew only twice per bite. But he can't accept this and tells her he's lost his appetite, rushing out of the table. As soon as he hides from his mother, he texts saying he needs to see her immediately. The person replies asking to meet at the usual place. "I need to see you now at the usual place." That night, Skinner goes to a motel and, inside the car, tells himself he deserves to be a man. Then he puts on a wig and a mustache and goes to the motel room. Inside the room, Skinner says to a woman that he only feels alive inside the room, but when we see her, it's someone he hired to be his mother. The woman treats him very well, unlike his real mother. Excited, Skinner warns he can't wait another second. In the next scene, we see Skinner's poetic mother doing everything he likes, the way he likes. His sandwich without crusts, he watching TV while his mom arranges all his clothes, and even the fact that he can cut wood in his bed without hearing any complaints. But as soon as the night ends, Skinner leaves a mug saying "best mom in the world" for her. As he leaves the motel, he takes off the disguise and thinks about the fact that she's not his real mother. But what he doesn't realize is that the woman disguised is actually his real mother. If only she were my real mom. If only he were my real son. In the 10th scene, Homer's big mustache is revealed. On a normal day, Homer is mowing the lawn when Ned appears at his window and asks if Homer has seen his mustache around. But Homer says he'd think about it if he saw his neighbor's mustache. As soon as he looks at him, we can see Homer with a goatee, which he claims he's always had, and begins scratching it while thinking. At that moment, Ned gets annoyed and tells his kids that from now on, they would be Jewish. The 11th scene will talk about Spider-Man's fan. Near the end of the reviews, the comic guy is eating his sandwich and starts talking about each detail of his sandwich that makes it special. Later, he reads another one of his comics and makes several comments about the story. Then, he goes for a consultation with Dr. Hybert. When evaluating his exams, the doctor tells him that with the level of sour cream in his blood, his brain had been deprived of oxygen, and as a result, he was an idiot. However, the comic guy optimistically comments that the doctor's explanation was perfect, concise, and devastating. And while continuing to praise the doctor, he also praises the diagnosis as the best. Then he falls flat on the examination table, and soon after, we see the comic guy's tombstone. Best diagnosis. Comic guy heaven, 2 stars. And in the 12th scene, we will see the rise of the wise. With another normal night in Homer's life, he's at Moe's bar, as usual, when a new customer appears. Homer comments that he knows him, but the man says he's probably confusing him. However, Homer insists he's seen that man before. Then he starts recalling the man as a mailman, store clerk, city mechanic, fast food attendant, and even one of the doctors at Springfield Hospital. Homer claims it was him in all those places, but the man tells Homer that he doesn't know what to say because he actually has a very common face. But what no one imagined is that there was a factory where they made several men identical to the one Homer had recognized. Back at the hacker's location, the couple continues to live a romance. While they kiss, they end up losing their masks and their identities are revealed. The two end up enchanted by each other's beauty, but the man comments on their identities being revealed to the world. They also comment on the fact that the world now knows they're in love. They find this situation as incredible as the list of abandoned episodes that got cool titles but led to nothing. Soon, a compilation of covers is shown, with titles for stories that were never aired, precisely because they were abandoned. Back to the new couple, they question whether two people who can't share their personal data could have a life together. Then, her partner answers that they should at least try, even without knowing who the woman next to him is. Soon, the two can't wait to be Mr. and Mrs. Censorship. This romantic moment is interrupted by loud FBI knocks on the door, demanding that the two surrender and being called cybertrash. "I can't wait for us to be Mr. and Mrs. Censored, Fi!" But the woman warns that if this is the end of them, she would choose to show the dog scene, and her partner agrees. In the 13th scene, Homer is sitting at his kitchen table, having coffee when Santa's little helper arrives to have coffee with him. When he wishes Homer a good morning, Homer is startled to realize it's already morning, while the hackers are still surrounded by the FBI. At that moment, the man tells his companion he had prepared all the worst scenes to be played one by one. And as soon as they press the button, the Simpsons will die. So they decide to press the button together. Best videos to go through one by one. And when we press this button, the Simpsons will go together, then together. In the 14th scene, Chief Wiggum, tired of lies, reveals he knows Eddie is Ralph's father because it was obvious from the boy's hair. His wife says this isn't true, but when Eddie and Ralph arrive together, she has no choice but to reveal the truth. In the 15th scene, Lisa, disguised in a restaurant, looks at the menu and orders veal. And in the 16th scene, Milhouse, tired of lies, reveals to his parents that he did a DNA test and found out he wasn't their son. Hearing this, his parents are relieved not to be the boy's parents. In the 17th scene, Selma, also tired of lies and in her hospital bed, reveals that she wasn't actually Marge's sister, but her mother. She explains that when she had Marge, she was very young and ended up telling a huge lie. Marge asks who her real father was, but Selma can't finish the revelation because she suffers an attack. His name was Disco. Disco? Disco of what? In the 18th scene, janitor Willie reveals he wasn't the real father of the rake and that he wasn't Scottish but Welsh. And in the following scenes, we see Homer completely carefree, deciding to bathe with his favorite food, Marge and Lisa preparing for a trip into space, Prunks playing with his bouncing eyes, Homer trying to hide his fat to impress Marge, Homer being attacked by a bear while trying to hide between several toilets. There's a presentation of jockeys hiding under the ground. Homer prepares a leg for his wife at the show's opening. Homer pours a mysterious substance into a man's drink. This man, after drinking, starts revealing his true identity. "I'm still me inside." Chalmers whips himself in front of a crucifix for considering himself a sinner. Homer wakes up from a coma after trying to jump Springfield's Gorge. After 2 days unconscious, he gets up, not believing all the adventures he lived were just dreams. Then finally comes the end for the hackers, as their location is invaded by the FBI, who tell them to drop the code and leave the internet because they were arrested. But the man questions what the charge would be, and after giving several options, the woman warns that if the officials take another step, she'll destroy the IP and end the magic of the Magic Kingdom. But the officers let them be because no one cared about the revelations from The Simpsons. However, the woman warns that it wasn't this program she was talking about, but the entire company system. Then an agent calls them monsters, but the woman continues explaining that if she pressed one key, she'd erase the content of the entire company, and it would be as if they'd never existed. However, the agent believes that story is just a bluff. But this is when the woman gives more details about the program she was ready to delete. The agents realize she wasn't bluffing and decide to lower their weapons. Thus, the hacker decides to return the normal programming to all the viewers. Now we return to you the normal programming. Returning to the beginning of the story, the episode ends with Marge and Homer going to the scout camp, wanting to understand how the person in charge managed to lose 2 kids. But soon Bart and Lisa look quite down, bringing relief to their parents. And as they are warmly welcomed, Lisa and Bart ask if, when they get home, they could watch TV and never leave or have contact with nature again. Homer then says he's never felt prouder of them than he does at that moment, and reveals that while they were away, he and the kid's mom almost separated over something silly. But luckily, Homer had apologized. "While you were gone, your mom and I almost divorced over something insignificant. Fortunately, your dad apologized." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and your comment.